Welcome to another general awareness discussion. In this video, we're going to talk about multinational companies or in general international business. Okay, now let's get started with this presentation. Firstly, let's understand what is the meaning of international business. International business is where you do trade between two or more countries. It's also known as foreign trade. Okay, now international business in very simple term, you could just refer to it as imports and exports. But for this particular video, we're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail. We will understand international business from the multinational company point of view. Okay, now why would multinational companies in fact decide to take their business to different countries around the world? Now, what is a multinational company, you might ask yourself? A multinational company is one which has its business in more than one country. Okay, remember, a multinational company is a type of company which has got its business in more than one country. Now, even let's say you're a small manufacturer in some corner of India, your main exports are to a small country like Sri Lanka. Even then, you are classified as a multinational company. It's not necessary that your products are being sold in a large country or in a superpower like the American subcontinent or Europe or any of these places. Even if you're selling it to a small country nearby as well, that is still considered that you are as a multinational company. Now, why do multinational companies decide to change their business? That is, they no longer want to keep their home country as their main market. They want to go about selling their products to the rest of the world. One main reason for that is more consumers. Now, more consumers is equal to greater profits. Yes, if you are going through the current affairs quite regularly, you will actually see how profitable companies are. No company today does its work from a social point of view. That is, their main purpose is not to give the society big benefits, but it's in fact to make profits, and that's perfectly fine. So one big reason why they would go about selling their products outside their home country is because there are more customers. Okay, McDonald's noticed that America is not fat enough, and now they're deciding to sell their products even in India. Okay, then labor specialization. If you look at automobile manufacturers, most of the major automobile manufacturers are concentrated in and around Japan. That is Japan, South Korea. That's where you would come across a large number of automobile manufacturers, or the best ones at least. Now, the reason that is there because you find better specialization when it comes to the auto industry. The auto industry demands a lot of manpower, especially when it comes to design and innovation. And as we have seen in the past, the Japanese happen to be one of the most innovative people in the world. And whatever innovation you come across in automobiles, you find it most of these innovations happening in Japan or in any of those countries nearby, Japan or South Korea. Okay. Then political conditions. If conditions in your home country are not so good, you decide to do your business in a place where the conditions are more favorable politically. Now, for example, if you are a company which is there in Egypt or in Libya or in any of these countries which lack political stability, you will find it extremely difficult to do your business there because of constant rioting, constant bad political management. So you would decide that, okay, let me leave Egypt, let me leave Libya and move to a place where it's easier for me to do business. Now, I can say the same even for a domestic business as well in India. One of the reasons why you have little industry in places like West Bengal and Kerala is because of bad political conditions in those states. In fact, you saw that recently when it comes to Tata Motors, when they wanted to set up a manufacturing plant in West Bengal. You saw a large number of people create riots. In fact, it was so serious, it was almost classified as a civil war. West Bengal is not politically stable. And you find many countries as well which follow the same pattern, and businesses feel Let's go to a place which is more welcoming towards us. In fact, since our home country itself is not so polite to us. And then, nearness to raw materials. One of the reasons why you see a large number of oil companies come from places where oil resources are quite high, because the raw material access has been made easy. Okay. In fact, most of the oil companies prefer to do their business nearby to the location where the oil is in fact available. Now, many of the oil wells in the world happen to be around the Gulf, Northern Africa. Many multinational companies prefer to set up their refineries there because it reduces the cost of transport. I mean, especially American companies are known for doing this. Mobil is one of them. Mobil has refineries in Uganda, Sudan, Northern Africa, and many countries around the Sahara. They have this because most of the oil wells happen to be there. It's not really possible for them to set up a pipeline all the way from the Sahara towards America. You can imagine how that distance is. You have to cross the whole Atlantic with that pipeline. The cost is going to be exorbitant. So rather than that, they prefer to keep their manufacturing closer to the raw material location itself because it reduces cost. And then, factors of production made more suitable. What better example for this other than China? One major cost for manufacturing is human capital. That is, paying your employees who are supposed to work. Now, any company tries to minimize this particular cost because it's one of the most expensive there is. One of the reasons why you find a lot of manufacturing happening in China is because the raw materials available there, particularly when I say raw materials, I mean here human capital, which is the major input for manufacturing, that happens to be available at low cost. And that's one of the reasons why you see pretty much everything is in fact made in China. There is even an old joke, I think by Robin Williams. He says even the free Tibet stickers are made in China. So you can see what these guys actually do. They pretty much make everything. Now, the advantages, large scale activities and revenues. McDonald's likes to pride itself when they say they've sold billions of burgers worldwide. You can actually imagine how many outlets this company must have in order to sell so many. This is not something which is easy to comprehend. This is an extremely large number we're talking here. All multinational companies are known for their large scale activities. I mean, just visit the websites of TCS, Infosys, or even Bharti Airtel. They will tell you with how many different locations they are actually doing their business. Airtel recently expanded their activities towards Africa, Singapore and Malaysia and even Sri Lanka. Now all that is going to add to their expansion and increase the activity of Airtel's business. You will see in fact a large number of African countries subscribing to Airtel service. I mean, it's already happened and they're doing quite well there. Then access to inputs. Inputs here refers to people, materials, energy and even building. Now the best example for this, like I said, is China. One of the reasons why the Chinese country is in the Chinese people are doing so well in the world of manufacturing is not only because the cost of labor is low. In fact, the Chinese government in fact welcomed these people. They welcomed manufacturing companies and told them, come here and do business. We will give you everything that you want. Then economies of scale. Now, when you start manufacturing more and more, the cost of the units actually comes down. You can see this because the prices of cell phones have dropped significantly over a course of time. Samsung is in fact selling their phones all over the world. Now you can imagine how many units are actually being manufactured. And when so many units are being manufactured, the cost of manufacturing every unit comes down. And that's how you achieve economies of scale. A very good example of economies of scale is when you try to make Xerox copies of textbooks, notes, anything at all. You may have noticed if you're making say 100 plus copies, okay, 100 plus pages, the printer might go about giving you a concession. If it's say 50 paisa for front and back, more than 100 pages, he might say it's 30 paisa. Now that happens because he's able to reduce his cost from his side and he's able to pass on the savings to you. That's one of the examples of economies of scale. And then you have the opportunity to position your organization and develop its brands globally. Now, a brand like Coca-Cola has become so well recognized. The calligraphy of Coca-Cola is something which has become a universal language. All you have to show people is that calligraphy of Coca-Cola, the ribbon calligraphy as they call it. And this is something which has made it recognizable for the entire world. In fact, Coca-Cola has been able to use that ribbon calligraphy for even styling their bottles in Hebrew. That's the language spoken in Israel. Even there as well, you find their brand being recognized so easily. And instantly one will come to know what that brand is as soon as they see that particular logo. Levi's is one of those brands. Wherever you come across Levi's, all that they talk about is the quality of their product. And that's something which everyone has understood if you have ever worn a pair of Levi. You never really see the company saying that, okay, now we've come out with the low waist jeans. That's a new product that we are launching. They don't really talk about the styles of the product that they have. In most of the Levi products that you would have seen, all that they talk about is the quality of Levi as a brand. They really don't like to say anything more than that. And that's how the brands in fact achieve global recognition. Then, minimize tax liabilities across borders. A very good example for this would be Google. Now, listen to this carefully because it's a very, very interesting scenario on how Google is able to reduce its overall tax liability and hardly pay anything to the American government when they go about claiming for their taxes. Now, Google is predominantly into advertising. Aside the search engine, aside the cloud computing, all that, the main revenue for Google is always advertising. Now, in order for me to put an advertisement on Google, it's going to cost me 2,500 rupees per month, the basic package. Now, this money, I'll be paying this through credit card. The money from India, from me, from Bangalore, is going to go all the way to Ireland. Ireland, Google has got an office there in Ireland, the country full of castles. It has an office there. From there, the money gets moved from Ireland to Netherlands. Now, why does it move from Ireland to Netherlands? Is because they have a bilateral agreement wherein I send money to you, you send money to me, we don't ask questions. That's pretty much the summary of the bilateral agreement between Netherlands and Ireland. Now, from Netherlands, the money is in turn moved to the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands are a place right near the United Kingdom, pretty close by to the United Kingdom. The Cayman Islands are in fact a tax haven. The Cayman Islands government doesn't really care where money comes. In fact, the government is so well off thanks to tourism, they don't have to tax anyone for anything. They are quite sustained when it comes to the tourism revenue itself. So Netherlands, it sends it to the Cayman Islands. From the Cayman Island, it comes to Bermuda, the island of Bermuda there, and from there it in fact goes to America, that is California, the headquarters of Google. Now there's a long chain of moving money through different subsidiaries of Google is done so that they can reduce their tax liabilities. Now the American government has got no authority in a place like Bermuda. In fact, Bermuda will not even bother to have an agreement with them, and America can't coax them to put up an agreement as well. So when they move money around like this, Google is able to avoid taxes altogether to a significant extent. And this is one of the ways in which companies minimize their tax liability, or in fact eliminate their tax liability altogether. To be very honest, no one likes to pay taxes. Okay? You might have fun in solving a tax problem, but believe me, I as a taxpayer don't like to pay it. I can be brutally honest about that. The disadvantages. Complication of the business. In the previous slide, I told you the network Google must build in order to move money and reduce its tax liability. Now, doing something like this might sound very cool, but the infrastructure you need to put in is going to be quite expensive. When you have countless branches all over the world, the number of people you need to manage is going to be more. And more people you need to manage is always going to be a difficult task. And hence, international business can lead to complications. Then, a diverse environment and resources. Now, consider this. Coca-Cola needs to make sure that their products in fact follow the kosher policy of the Jewish customs. Now, the Muslims have got something called halal, while the Jewish people have got something called kosher. Now, in some of the products of Coca-Cola, they do not use sugar and instead they end up using corn syrup. Now, in order to show that whatever process, or whatever the products have been going through has in fact followed that policy of kosher, they need to label the product specifically that in fact Coca-Cola as well is considered to be kosher. Just like how you see in some of the meat shops saying in brackets that okay, the meat has been processed through halal. This is something which is going to be very expensive for the company to do, because if you're doing this in one country, you need to do it in many others as well. Now, the diverse culture of people is what leads to complication of the business. Each customer will demand the product to be in a particular way, and the company needs to tailor the product to that requirement. To an extent, it sounds fun, but over a course of time, it's going to get more and more complicated when you do this. And then, challenge for multinational companies in understanding local politics. Now, if you look at the Orissa government, they recently scrapped the deal of POSCO, or rather scrapped the deal, I could say that they put the deal in a very shaky ground. Now, for a long period of time, POSCO has been trying to invest in Orissa and trying to come out with one of the biggest steel plants in the world. POSCO is a Korean company, South Korean. Obviously South Korean. You don't expect anything to happen from North Korea. I mean, you have a high school guy being the leader of that place. So what could you expect? So POSCO is trying to do business in Orissa, and for a long period of time they've been pushed aside by the Orissa government. They've been telling them, okay, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And so far so good, that's never happened. The problem is international businesses expect to move things quite fast, because the faster they move, the easier it gets for them to make revenue. And local politics is always a concern for them, and it delays the course of their business, and in fact eventually it delays their revenue as well. Then, notoriously slow pace for international business developments. Now, if you look at how long it took for an international business to fulfill a contract, it turns out to be quite long. Now, if you will refer to agreements between companies to do business, it's really not something which happens overnight. This could take years together for them to go about doing it. Now, consider the recall which is done by Toyota. Now, when they do a recall, they're going to recall lakhs of cars, and they're going to take a long period of time for them to go about fixing the problem. Now, this is what they refer to as the slow pace of development. As efficient as international businesses are, in many of the cases, these guys end up being quite slow, and in many cases, they end up being inefficient. Now, this is what you would refer to as one of the demerits of international business. Moving on, how do companies go about operating in different parts of the world? Now, some companies are operating in one of these methods. They would prefer, say, franchisee. Another type of company might prefer something like turnkey. Now, it's all dependent on the type of industry they are in. So I'll get into the details of this. I hope you are able to understand them and relate to them as well. Franchisee, the best example for this would be fast food. Now, what happens in a franchisee is, let's say you're a person, I'll talk about Coffee Day, since we've all been to that place which is supposed to serve coffee for some reason. And somewhere in the bottom, I find froth and with traces of coffee flavor somewhere in the cup. Now, Coffee Day, let's say you want to open a Coffee Day franchisee. You need to pay Coffee Day head office a large amount of money to acquire their trademarks, their patents, their procedures, and then you could go about starting your own Coffee Day. Now, I'm not sure what the cost is. The Coffee Day people will come and inspect the land where you want to do business. They'll look at how many people can be served, and then they'll consider giving you the rights in order to sell their products. Now, when you purchase a franchisee, you are in fact acquiring the trademarks, the patents of this company. When I say that, for example, the Coffee Day logo that you have seen, a lot can happen over coffee. Now, if you want to put that up, you need to pay Coffee Day royalty for it. You need to pay them a fee for it. It's usually a one-time thing that you need to pay. Only after you paid it can you go about utilizing that board and can you start your Coffee Day operations. I remember this friend of mine who runs a corner house in Bangalore. He was even telling me, after you get a franchisee right, the training is also given by the company, and it's one of the best trainings apparently. And this is in respect to corner house. He was telling me how Death by Chocolate, the cake for Death by Chocolate is actually made. They have a very secret recipe on how this is actually made, and that's what makes Death by Chocolate from Corner House so unique. So they even give you very high quality training on how you're supposed to do, even make the products that is there in the menu card. All that is in fact part of franchisee. Fast food, like I said, McDonald's, Taco Bell, that happens to run on a franchisee mode of business. And then you have licensing. Licensing, a good example for licensing would be the KTM bikes, which happen to be made by Bajaj Group. Now, Bajaj Auto is actually making the KTM bikes. Why can't KTM make it on its own here? Now, one of the reasons why they are not making on their own here is because if KTM wants to do business here, they need to acquire land, put up a factory, train people how to go about manufacturing, install the necessary machinery, set up a distribution network. You can imagine how difficult this is. So rather than that, they've given the license to Bajaj Group to go about manufacturing the KTM bikes. Now what's going to happen here is KTM is going to take care of the marketing. That is, they'll put up the advertisements. All Bajaj is going to do is manufacture, and KTM pays them a fixed amount of money for the amount of units Bajaj is manufacturing. Bajaj's role here is only on a win situation here. If a KTM bike is left unsold in a showroom, Bajaj is not going to bear the loss. The loss is in fact going to be borne by KTM itself. So that's what you do when it comes to licensing. And then turnkey. Turnkey is always done in the case of construction companies. A turnkey project, a good example for a turnkey project would be the Bangalore Metro. The actual owner of Bangalore Metro happens to be the Karnataka government, or Namma Metro as you would call it. Now, the Karnataka government obviously doesn't have resources to put up something like the metro. So instead they've contacted Gammon, GMR and Larsen & Toubro to build the various phases of metro. Now let's, for the sake of simplicity, assume Larsen & Toubro is the company building the metro project in Bangalore. Okay. So what would Larsen & Toubro do exactly here? Larsen & Toubro would put up the infrastructure, that is the pillars, the different trains, the gauges, everything Larsen & Toubro is going to do. And afterwards Larsen & Toubro is going to run the trains. They're going to check if everything is okay, and finally after checking and testing if everything is okay, after the entire construction is done, then they transfer the project to the Karnataka government. In this case, the actual owner here happens to be the Karnataka government, but the person doing the construction here happens to be Larsen & Toubro. Now when Larsen & Toubro does this, they're getting a compensation for their work, and that's how turnkey projects operate. Turnkey projects are how construction companies in fact do business. Prestige Group as well does the same thing, DLF does the same thing as well. In this case, you build something, you operate it, in the sense you check if everything is okay, you test it, and then you transfer it to someone else. Of course, the company doing this will get a huge commission for their work. And then you have wholly owned subsidiary. Now IT companies work like this. IBM Global or IBM PLC, Public Limited Company, is in fact there in America. Their subsidiary in India is known as IBM Private Limited, or IBM India Private Limited it's known as. Now that's what you refer to as a wholly owned subsidiary. A wholly owned subsidiary means you own the company single-handedly. You are not partnering with an Indian company when you do this. This applies to the telecom sector, the IT sector. It does not apply to the insurance sector. For example, you have an insurance from Canara Bank and HSBC. Now, the major partner here happens to be Canara Bank. The minor here happens to be HSBC. HSBC does not have a wholly owned subsidiary in India when it comes to the insurance business. And then joint venture. The best example for joint venture, Hero Honda. For a hilarious advertisement of Hero Honda, check out Sourav Ganguly dancing. It's an old advertisement of Sourav Ganguly and Hrithik Roshan. It's actually quite funny to see Sourav dance. No disrespect, but it's really funny to see him dance. So what did Hero Honda actually do here? Honda is a Japanese major and Hero of course is an Indian major. Now a joint venture is defined as a strategic alliance. I know that sounds like a really cool word, but that's how they call it. Now a joint venture here, Hero wants to improve its technology, Honda wants to gain its market in India. Now remember, when Honda came to India, no one knew what it was. We did not have internet to Google and find out, okay, is Honda a big brand? So what did Honda do here? They partnered with an Indian company and they decided to do business in India. So you had Hero Honda CBZ, one of the most popular bikes in the country. So how did that work? Honda here is going to supply the technology while Hero is going to supply the customers. As in, Hero is going to make sure that Honda gets its necessary customers. For both the parties here, it's going to be a win-win situation. Honda is going to establish itself as a major brand in the country. Hero, on the other hand, is going to be exposed to a very large amount of high-quality technology, which was not possible otherwise. So that's what you do when it comes to a joint venture. Joint ventures are always temporary yet long-term agreements. The agreement between Hero Honda was more than a decade. You come across this even with Kawasaki Bajaj, TVS Suzuki, even that happened to be a joint venture agreement. On the other hand, some joint venture agreements don't last very long. Like you saw that with Mahindra and Renault. They came out with the Logan car and unfortunately the Logan didn't really meet the expectations and the company had to cut short their agreement. So this is what you would refer to as a joint venture. Like I said, each of these different ways in which a multinational company does business is purely dependent on the sector of industry they are part of. Franchisee, fast food, food and beverage, licensing, automobile manufacturing, turnkey construction, wholly owned subsidiary, telecom and service sector, joint venture also in the case of automobiles. Okay, licensing is usually manufacturing in general. Joint ventures, the best example I could think of would be automobiles itself. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any queries, do leave them in the comment section. Thank you for your time. Subscribe to my videos. Have a nice day.